Hey,
Hey,
what's up,
Fee.
everybody? What's up, Matt? How are you?
Great. How's it going, Fee? How are you?
I'm good. Just like always, the news cycle is endless, constant. It's hard to keep up, really. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
It's been sad, crazy. Um, you know, a lot of people thought that the ceasefire or hoped that the ceasefire would be something that would be respected. Here on the show, I think you were present for one of the discussions. We said that that wasn't going to be the case, likely, not because we didn't want it to be, but because we know Israel hasn't seen a ceasefire that it respects.
yeah,
Throughout the decades of its fight with, and I wouldn't even call it a fair fight, I would call it, it's total ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, it's never really respected that. It didn't respect the ceasefire with Lebanon. So there was really no indication when they haven't received any sort of punishment for what they were doing the last 17 months
yeah,
of this, Holocaust against Gazans. And then, the whole Syrian thing happened. And now there's even more attacks happening in Syria. There's a new genocide in Syria.
yeah,
There's Yemen that's been bombed by the United States and by the UK. And then there's obviously also Lebanon that got
yeah.
bombed recently as well in the south. And so today's news really focused so much on the latest attacks that have killed at least 700 people, Matt. Refugee camps, people recovering, thinking, hey, we're going to be okay. We've survived these months. And now they're being bombed again. And people who had survived until now are being killed. And some of these people include journalists. And it's just at this point, it's hard to find the words, I think, to really describe the current situation.
Yeah, it's as you say, Fee. This is just heart wrenching to see, and like it's happening. So the stuff's coming at us so fast. We wake up every morning and we see another disaster waiting to look into, and these, like you mentioned, the journalists being killed, and this is on purpose. This isn't accidental. This is all on purpose. And when you talk about, we've had this discussion, and we weren't trying to be Debbie Downers. We just were trying to look at historical context and see that this is the game plan. They do this all the time, and the changing of power is not really a changing of power. It's just it's all theater. And we knew that the both side, Biden and Trump, both trying to take credit for this ceasefire. For what? To know, we knew this was going to happen. They were going to intentionally break it. It was only a matter of time, and here we are. And like you say, you're talking about four different attacks at the same time. I mean, we got this ongoing genocide. We got in Gaza, which is we're going to get into this, I guess, today, specifically what's happening in Gaza. But like you mentioned, I mean, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and then to antagonize it and instigate a war with Iran on top of all of this. Trump has just
Mhm.
been a louder mouthpiece for the military industrial complex and for Israel's control of our government. He's just been louder, and that's the only difference. The only difference. People ask me, how would things be different if Kamala was in right now? No different. She's just not as loud. That's it. So we can discuss the loudness and the
Yeah.
abruptness and these truth social posts going out and what he's saying the quiet part out loud, and maybe that's good. We could argue that, hey, at least we can see it happen. At least he's just announcing it. Here's how horrible we are. Here's how horrible Israel is. And we can look at that and say, well, maybe Kamala wouldn't be announcing it. She'd be faking these, oh, we're up trying to figure this out, and we feel so bad, and all that's garbage, which we've heard for the last 4 years. But like, no, that's it. There's no difference. It's the same war machine, and here we are. And we got to have these discussions. So as hard as it is to do, here we are, and we have to talk about this, and we can't stop talking about this, and we can't stop talking about Gaza. That's for sure.
Yeah. We can't. And and something you said right about Iran, that's something to touch on as well, because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, the United States is making this all about Iran and
Yep.
and the discussion of Iran not being allowed to have nuclear weapons. But it is never discussed why Israel is allowed to have nuclear weapons. And of course, those of us that would prefer no one have nuclear weapons, that's an obvious choice, but people aren't going to do that when the United States and Israel are the ones constantly bombing others. So why cannot Iran not have nuclear weapons if Israel is destroying the entirety of West Asia, and doing it, of course, under the disguise of combating terrorism, something we have done multiple times? It seems to me, Matt, we're in the continuation of the war on terror, and they're trying to bring this back. The Trump administration in and is trying to implement it on steroids. And what we said before he took office, we said Trump would focus on the global South. He was going to focus on with West Asia, take the war in Ukraine, shifted towards Iran, and also, of course, in Latin America. And we're also going to talk about what's happening there, because it's much more than just going after illegals or going after undocumented people or going after immigrants. We're talking about something that's not just going to affect foreigners, but the same type of technology and the same type of persecution is ultimately also going to affect the American public. And it's these policies that Trump is bringing in are actually very fascistic. And we call, like Pasta likes to say, we called balls and strikes. And we criticized the Democratic Party when they were in power. But now the Republican Party is in charge. And as you said, there's really little policy difference at the helm. So, Matt, I just want to start off by going over some of this. This is an article from Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera isn't my favorite outlet, but everybody has been reporting on this, and they've been talking about the new wave of bombings that Israel has unleashed on people. The death toll, they say, is around 700, but we suspect it is much greater than that. Today, they killed over 60 people. Like in this last 24 hours, 2 Palestinian journalists were killed. One of them was an Al Jazeera reporter whose car was blown up in Gaza. And they also bombed Nasser Hospital again, killing several people. The reported death toll of Palestinians in Gaza is reportedly 50,000, but that's not counting
No.
the other associated deaths as a result of the Gaza genocide, which could be in the hundreds of thousands at that point. And so I kind of wanted to touch on those facts before we go over this article on the Cradle, and I want to ask your opinion on that. And this is the Cradle article, because Israel's claim is that the ceasefire is over because Hamas violated its side of the bargain. And the reality is, and I said this last time in the last show I did, that even Israeli media are admitting, oh no, Israel never had any intention on maintaining the ceasefire, because they don't have any intention on even the existence of a Palestinian state at all whatsoever. So the Cradle writes, the Gaza ceasefire talks collapse after Israel rejects all proposals. A report on here, and they said at least 730 people have been killed in under 1 week. As a result of Israel's renewed war on Gaza, the ceasefire negotiations in the Egyptian capital have fallen apart after an Israeli delegation rejected Egypt's new proposal and left Cairo, according to sources cited by Al Arabi Al Jadid on March 24th. Israel rejected all proposals despite Hamas's positive response to a humanitarian ceasefire proposal, the sources said, adding that Tel Aviv is coordinating with regional parties to exert maximum pressure on Hamas ahead of any new negotiations. Hamas refused to evacuate top political and military leaders from Gaza in the absence of a clear plan to end the war. Backed by the U.S., Israel is working to derail the Egyptian plan for Gaza's reconstruction. They went on to say. And earlier this month, as you all know, there was a meeting when then the Arab states had endorsed an Egyptian reconstruction plan at the summit in Cairo. And this aimed, of course, to counter what Donald Trump had proposed to expel the Gazan residents and, of course, build their own type of luxury real estate there. So recently, Egypt has come under fire for Al Sisi, its government, saying that they are willing to accept 500,000 Gazans, even though, of course, they said that wasn't true. Multiple reports were revealed from these talks, and so ultimately, we know the Egyptian border and the border with Jordan is controlled by Israel. So this is a very strong possibility that eventually Egypt and Jordan will fold. Matt, what do you think about all of this?
Man, there's a lot to go through here. For as far as the ceasefire itself being broken, and I do think the cradle breaking this down. We know that they were never planning on they were going to break this. That Israel was going to break this no matter what Hamas does, and we saw the language that they've been using, and Trump's administration has been using this language Hamas, and every once in a while they're talking about residents. They're not even careful anymore. We're hearing them say the residents need to be careful. The residents of Gaza need to give up, need to do this, need to do that. So now you're just talking about punishing these civilians, and they're saying it out loud that's who they're actually targeting. And like you said, Fee, this whole time it's never been about having a Palestinian state. They were never interested. And I think the saddest thing to see was when we were going through. There were the three. Well, we never got to the third stage, but they were trying to go the first stage of the ceasefire, the second stage, and we saw that. I think it was just last week. We had the families of the prisoners, the hostages that were in Israel. They were trying the Gaza families were showing up, and their family members were not there, and they were there. They were excited that here we are. You're supposed to give us our family members, and they weren't there, and they couldn't even say anything. They had to keep their mouth shut because just that mere hope that they could maybe get to this next stage of the ceasefire, and they all went home with their tails between their legs and just it was a very sad moment where they couldn't even say anything. And yet we were sitting here going, they're just messing with them. They're not even, they have no intention of keeping their side of this. And then you have, like you said, and this is important, the Israeli media is admitting this. They're saying we had no intention. It's the US media, it's the Western media specifically here that is still trying to put this BS theater out there that Hamas, they just are not to be trusted. Look at them putting Israel in a position where they just have to, hey, the deal's gone. Hey, what are you going to do? So they're just lying, and there's people still believing this garbage here more than in Israel. And I think that that's the key, and we have to keep showing this to people that Israel's admitting this because they have less they know that they don't have to cover it up as much because they can get that manufactured consent because in Israel we know that they're more they know there's no other option for them. We have to get rid of all of them, and they've been saying that from the beginning. Like you said, 17 months ago, when this for the October 7th thing, they've been saying from the beginning out loud, we got to get rid of all of them because they're gonna even when we blow up babies, they're gonna grow up and they're gonna just hate us. They're gonna want to kill us. So we got to get them. We got to preemptively strike. And this goes back to, and I'm gonna go back to what you said about resurrecting the war on terror. This is key what you
Mhm.
said, Fee. We have a situation where Donald Trump is now using language that we remember from the early 2000s. We remember Bush and Cheney and we have to get them over here so that we don't get them here. We got to smoke them out of their caves. The language I remember specifically, Fee, and I know you remember this. It's you're either with us or you're against us. So you're either with us or you're with them. So there's no room for critique. There's no room for saying, hey, maybe we're doing this wrong. No, we have to go get every last one of them over there. And the saddest part is Donald Trump ran against this in 2015. He ran against this in that first term. And he called this out, the Bush and Cheney war machine. He says, we're no longer going to do this. Fast forward to today, he's not only doing it, but like he said, he is doubling down and doing it at, I'll borrow one of his phrases, warp speed war on terror. That's what he's doing right now. We're seeing it every day unfold. The exact thing he was against just a few years back.
I think you're right, and I think, unfortunately, the people who supported Donald Trump, and, I have more of patience for people who supported Trump who were just regular people who thought,
Mm,
"Hey, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are so bad that whatever, let's see, we don't really have a choice, so let's see what sticks." Then people in media and analysts and journalists, or even people who have YouTube shows, right? You know better. So you should be able to say, wait a minute, this is going to be the same thing. Look at this empty rhetoric. Look at what's happening behind the scenes. And Donald Trump has unfortunately proven us right by basically going on like the war on terror on steroids, tying everything that's happening right now in the Middle East or West Asia with immigration. And this is
mm,
something that we talked about months ago, but now we're seeing it come to fruition, unfortunately, with everything that the administration is doing in terms of going after people like this Palestinian activist who is nowhere to be found, going after anybody that may have any affiliation or who they're profiling to have any pro Hamas or anti-Semitic affiliations, or people then in from Latin America who they're calling part of these terrorists or these gangsters that are part of the Tren de Agua. So it's all tying together in a sense in order to fearmonger people once again against the other. And this administration is able to do that and still have people cheering for Donald Trump because of the supposed negotiations that are going on with Russia and Ukraine and that war ending. So a lot of people said, well, let's hopefully just avoid nuclear war. But now, as you said in the beginning, we're reigniting a possible war with Iran. So this is all just showing us that really one war isn't going to end. It continues. It expands and switches over into another region. And I just want to show a couple images here. This is the aftermath of the airstrike on Nasser Hospital. If you can bring that one up, Jayme. And that one, it's just, this is what you see when you go to these places. It's just endless. These are hospitals, by the way. And I posted something, Matt. I don't know if you saw it. I said breaking news. Hamas just bombed Tel Aviv, bombed houses, hospitals,
yeah,
schools, and it's like, obviously. Then I said, just kidding, it was
because
Israel,
yeah,
but just the fact that we're like, what? That can never happen,
no,
right? Because if that were to happen, can you imagine the outrage in the world? But we have had 17 months, so almost a year and a half of constant genocide, of constant ethnic cleansing, not just in Gaza, but all around this region. And everybody just says, oh, yeah, it's always like that there. This is how they are. This is how it always is with these people. Religious fanatics. This is just a religious war. This is just, and even in Syria, oh, this is just, sectarianism. They're just fighting amongst each other. This is it. There's never any accountability
mm,
for the US role in instigating everything that we're seeing happen right now.
no, no, not at all. And we've seen these hospitals be blown up over the last 17 months. This just targeted and blown up. And I think that they're getting I don't want to say sloppy, but they realize they don't even have to make justifications anymore. The earlier the few hospitals, the first few that were blown up in the beginning of this, there was that narrative like, oh no, they're hiding under that they're in the tunnels, so it's the only way we can get them. We have to get Hamas, and they did it on purpose, and they use civilians as human shields. We've heard all that stuff. They're not even doing that anymore. They're just blowing up the hospital. They're just targeting these people. And you mentioned the journalists. We should talk about that. They're just targeting these journalists. They're not being used as human shields from Hamas, and they're not even trying to use that language anymore. And so I don't know how, our media are, they're the biggest criminals here that are allowing these news stories not to be not to be reported accurately or at all. And that's their job. And they know they're doing this, and they do it every day, and they protect Israel. They protect this narrative. And then most people here don't get to see any of this. And you have to share a tweet like that, which was very creative. And I applaud you for doing that. But to show how
Yeah.
the hypocrisy and how off it is that you could report something like that about Hamas and everybody would go crazy. But it's Israel. No, not a peep. And you're watching these hospitals be targeted and blown up. You're watching these children being targeted and blown up. And it's every day. It's insane right now. And the journalists too being targeted and murdered. And I'll throw this in. What I was able to I discovered was that they're on top of all these targeting. They're making it hard for people to have an internet connection at all there. So it's hard to even get some of this footage. They're purposely trying to scramble. Israel's trying to scramble the internet connection to make it hard to get any signal out at all. So they have to get creative with this, and it's harder for us
Yeah.
to even get some of this footage. But you can imagine the stuff we're not seeing because it got lost in the shuffle. They weren't able to get it out on the internet, and we weren't able to see it. So we can only imagine some of the horrific stuff we haven't seen, let alone the stuff we have seen, which the mainstream media refuses to cover or refuses to show people because that's their job, is to protect Israel.
Well, this is all by design, Matt, right? Like we know that they don't want this to get out, so they're targeting journalists. And we're going to talk about the
Yeah,
journalists in a second, unfortunately. And because to me, that's heartbreaking
yeah,
for multiple reasons. And I think that it's really worth reminding people that these journalists that stay there and that report on this, they are truly heroes, and they are truly just beyond any sort of comprehension, the courage that it takes to be there. Because I guarantee you a lot of people would not be in Gaza and in any area where they have the possibility of getting killed. But when you hear the way that Zionists talk about Palestinians, you understand that there's no such reality to a two-state solution, because Israel doesn't want that, and because they will continue to destroy whatever's left of Palestine. And there's no reality to Israel existing and there being peace in the region, because Israel wants to take over. And they have said it as much. They have said it every single day. They have openly said that they want to take over. They are entitled to everything. So when you hear this, and this guy, I mean, he's saying it in Hebrew. So I if we can go ahead and play that, but I'm just gonna read it. Actually, I'm just gonna read it. He said, "Now we need to only focus on one thing,"
ועכשיו
and
אנחנו צריכים
this is
להתרכז
a
רק בדבר אחד,
a
לא לבזבז
guy
זמן על
saying
דיינית
this on
הצודקת,
like
ולא
TV,
לבזבז
right?
זמן על קטר
And
גיט
not to
ומנטה,
waste time.
סליחה, לא נעים להגיד פה מה זה
uh,
מעניין,
He
להתרכז
said, and not to
רק
waste time
באיך,
on
כנראה, הברירה
Qatar
היחידה,
gates,
להפסיק את המלחמה, להביא את החטופים, ואחר
which
כך
I don't give
מצווים
a
להרוס את כל
sorry,
עזה.
I don't give about
ועכשיו אנחנו צריכים
focus only
להתרכז
on how
רק
apparently
בדבר
the
אחד,
only
לא
choice
לבזבז.
to stop the war, to bring back the hostages. As far as I'm concerned, he said, as far as I'm concerned, the only choice, Netanyahu can destroy all of Gaza, is essentially what he said. As far as I'm concerned, Netanyahu can destroy all of Gaza. Um, Openly, this is what's said on Israeli media. And again, when you go to Tel Aviv, when you go to Jerusalem, this is the sentiment. This is the sentiment of the overwhelming majority of people. They see absolutely nothing wrong. And we've talked about this before, where some people think, well, you can redeem some people, but this is what people are taught, taught to hate from a very, very small age. So how do you fix that? It's just there has to be an economic, and I think military type of stopping to Israel. There
yeah.
is no other way. Unless we do that, they're just going to continue.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think the way, again, what our job is to do is to bring historical context to the table every time when an October 7th event happens and people think, oh, it just started here, unprovoked attack, right? So unprovoked attack. Nobody has any sense of the 77 years of illegal occupation and what Israel's intentions were from the beginning as a military state, as an ethno state. This is something that, as you say, we can't look to a solution with what is in front of us right now, which is what Israel's intention was from the beginning. They've just been able to do it behind the scenes for several decades. Now it's out in the open. That's the only that's the only thing that changed at October 7th, was now the thing you were doing for decade after decade after decade, you're now just doing that out in the open, and you're doing it at a faster pace. That's it. But the greater Israel plan has always been the plan. We just were asleep at the wheel. And I say we, I mean the Western population was asleep because the media allowed us to be asleep from this. And we didn't have these conversations before. Well, some people were having it, but we weren't fully paying attention. But everybody can see this now. The world can see it. And you're right, Fee. We don't have to cower and pretend that there's some sort of, if only both sides, we can have a two-state. No. We recognize what Israel is. We see that it's not a norm. This is not how a country functions, not in a military operation like this. They've been doing it the whole way. It needs to stop. So however you do that, however you have to dissolve that. You have to start from scratch and figure out what we can do with these people in a different way that's not a military occupation. I don't know. You got to get rid of this flag. You got to come up with something new, but you got to reset and start from scratch. And it cannot be a military occupation. It just can't. So this is complicated as far as how do you structure this? I don't know, but I know what we have right now has to go. Period. It's not okay, and it has to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way. It's got to go. That's it. Period. And unfortunately today, there were more journalists added to the over 200 killed by Israel during these last 17 months, targeted. These journalists were targeted. So today, the Israeli military killed two of them. One of them was the journalist Hassam Shabbat, who was killed in Jabalia, northern Gaza. And then there was also the journalist Mohammed Mansour, who is a correspondent for Palestine Today. So if we can start off with this one, this is the Mohammed Mansour of Palestine Today. He was killed, and you can just play it, but I'll talk through it. There was recent meetings between him and his family as well, because these are journalists that live and work in Gaza, so they have family members. They are experiencing the genocide like everybody else, but on top of that, they're also reporting on it, right? And very clearly, the journalists have the press label. And one of the things I was told when I was in Lebanon by one of my friends there was wearing the press thing when you're in Lebanon or when you're in Palestine, it actually isn't a symbol to protect you. In many ways, it actually hinders you and endangers you, because Israel specifically likes to target press, specifically Palestinian press or Lebanese press or press from the other side, the resistance side, right? So wearing something that says press makes you a target rather than protects you. And that is a very warped thing for us to understand and comprehend, because usually anywhere else in the world, you wear press and it's usually supposed to protect you. Now, I've only encountered such tactics against the press in the United States, actually, where the press have been targeted when they're reporting on protests.
Yes.
When you're filming the police doing something, or when you're showing something that could be used against the authorities, the people in power, they don't like that. And yes, they do target you. And I've seen that happen multiple times. But yet there we go again to who trains our police and how these are all intertwined. Well, there you go. It's the United States and Israel have that connection, right? And this is a picture of Hassam Shabbat, who was, again, the second journalist that was targeted. And, you can just go through the tweets, Jayme. There's a lot of them. I just wanted to highlight, and I want to warn people some of the images that you're about to see, because they're very, very graphic images. But I think, again, I always kind of go back and forth on this, but I do think these are human beings, 23 years old, very young, 24 and 23. I mean, we're talking about people that weren't even born during 9/11 or were just born. I mean, this is disgusting. This is, targeted. There's a desire to eliminate these people completely. There's a desire to just silence them in this way. Um and yeah, I mean, the images are just extremely graphic. So, but there are multiple tweets of that I've been coming across of several of the journalists before they died saying, we're still here, we're still gonna fight. I thought the slaughter was over. Actually, Hassan had tweeted,
Yeah.
I'm still carrying the torch, when he took a photo with two of his other friends who were already dead at that point. He tweeted about meeting his mom. I mean, it really saddens you because um you're thinking that maybe some of these people made it. They made it through a genocide. They finally have a chance to tell their stories, to be able to continue their work, and you know they they didn't make it because Israel decided that they don't want to respect anything.
Yeah.
So
And you said both of these journalists, like all the rest before them, that were also targeted and killed over these last 17 months, they're heroes. They are heroes.
yeah.
They know what they're signing up for, and they do it because it's for the good of humanity, and it's because someone has to go in there and do it, and they signed up for this, and here we are. And you have Mohammed Mansour, and then you had immediately after that you said he was 23. Hossam Shabbat was 23 years old, and these tweets about him reuniting with his mom, and that never happened. He was excited about that. There was just to understand that the history of this as a 23-year-old journalist. I mean, this is a tough job for anyone, but to be 23 and to go into this profession, he said, you know what, I got this opportunity to be to have this is the greatest assignment I could have received. This opportunity to go to my country, my hometown that is being genocided, and I get to cover it in real time. And he said this on day one, his house was blown up. He lost 100 people, of friends and family that he knows of throughout this time. And then the ceasefire is announced. And like you said earlier, and this part is this just hurts my heart here, Fiorella, to just understand that, like you had said about the ceasefire happens, and there were people that were excited. I remember we were playing footage of people jumping up and down and saying, "We've done it, we did it, we did it." And then you and I, again, we were not being Debbie Downers, but we knew this is not going to last. We know that Hossam Shabbat was excited. He was one of the people excited. He was like, "I made it. I did it. I did the job that was impossible. I've lost all these people in the process, but I was able to do journalism. I was able to cover what was happening on the ground. And now I get to go home to my mother. And now it doesn't happen because of what has happened in the last couple of weeks, particularly in the last 24 hours. And he's dead, and he's not going to see his mom now. This is it's so tragic. And people have to understand this isn't by accident. This isn't because it was a dangerous profession by nature and that's just what happens, like a fireman or somebody, hey, you signed up, you happen to be in, these people are targeted. They have a target on their back. It says press. That is a bullseye. And like you said, Fiorella, and we have to understand that that's what comes with this. This is not an accident. It's not a wrong place, wrong time. He is targeted, and the reason he's targeted is because Israel does not want him to tell these stories. He does not want the press to do their jobs, so they take them out. And he's another unfortunate victim of this, and we have to keep doing the job for him and keep reporting and shouting this at the top of our lungs on behalf of both of these journalists killed today in the last 24 hours, and then all the ones before them as well. And it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening unless enough people stand up and say enough of this and start holding some people accountable, including our own administration, of our own president, and of course Benjamin Netanyahu and everybody else that is guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity throughout this process.
Well, Matt, one of the things that I just saw that I wanted to mention from Hossam Shabbat, he wrote this on April 11th of 2024, so a little bit less than a year ago, because there was a complaint that Western journalists aren't able to cover Israel Gaza because they can't get there, right?
Mm.
And yes, of course, a lot of us would go and cover it. Obviously, mainstream media is going to have an angle and is not going to go into the thick of it, even if they were allowed to enter in the same way. But he said something that I think a lot of people need to hear. And he said the biggest problem is not Western journalists being unable to enter, but the fact that Western media doesn't respect and value Palestinian journalists. My colleagues and I risk our lives every day to report on. No one knows Gaza like we do, and no one understands the complexity of the situation like we do. If you care about what's happening in Gaza, you should amplify Palestinian voices. We don't need Western journalists to tell our stories. We are capable of telling and reporting on our own stories. And that is what I've always strive to do, because it's not about all of us going there. It's about really helping these people tell their story, because again, a Western journalist, any of us, we're not going to know the historical context the way they do. We're not going to know everything that they have experienced the way they have. So there's a definite difference in how they're telling the story. And it's sad that his words now, a year later, ring more true than ever. But it's something we have to do, as you said, is really amplify their voices, really continue talking about this for people like him and those like before him. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
those after him. I mean, this is going to keep going, Fiorella. This is going to keep happening. I'm not looking. None of us are looking forward to it, but we're going to probably have to report on the next wave of journalists that are targeted very soon. And it's just sad. This whole thing is so sad. And we just need more people to get angry, get in the streets, as they're doing by the way, as they're doing in Yemen. Man, are those there? You got some people, courageous people in the streets, because they know what genocide looks like. They know what occupation looks like, and they know that you have to get in the street and support our fellow man that are dealing with this right now. That we have to show that support for everyone that's involved, that's affected by this. So I think it's too bad that we can't do that here. Yeah, we're just not informed enough. But we know why. We know why.
It was interesting. David Miller, who knows a lot about the history of the region, said earlier that protests aren't enough, and that you need to listen to the people in Gaza. I'm not discouraging people, but I am saying at this point, that's not going to stop them. That they don't care. I mean, millions of people protested against the war in Iraq, and it really didn't change the outcome of things. And there needs to be, as we said earlier on, a targeting of the entire Zionist movement. And I agree with what David Miller said. I mean, it has to be this sort of, they have to fear everybody else coming after them. There has to be some sort of accountability, because if not, then it's not going to stop. So there has to be an elevation to how we're responding to this, because as great as protests and social media and all these other things that we're doing to inform people, I think everybody, mostly in the United States, knows what's happening right now in Gaza, and Israel's reputation is on the floor. But that's not enough to stop them, because they still have the backing of the United States, and they still are only slapped on the wrist by everybody else who doesn't technically support them, but in a way doesn't really go after them either. They're still taken into consideration as a normal state, a normal country that has not broken international law, that isn't enacting a genocide and multiple wars on multiple fronts. They're still taken seriously. And until the people in power don't change that, it's not going to happen. And if those people in power aren't changing it, then I guess it's up to the people of these countries that are still operating with Israel to do something about it. So I think we're unfortunately a long ways away from that. But yeah,
Well,
that's
we
go ahead.
have more ability here that we're just not aware of. We're not aware of the power the people actually have here more than anywhere else. And here's why: because the money comes from here. We fund
Yeah.
it. So no one else
Yeah.
we're funding it. So if you could figure out a way to cut off the funding, how do you do that? Is getting in the streets enough? No, you're probably right. That's not enough. But I'm gonna throw this hypothetical out. Imagine if, and this is just a hypothetical, but this is just so we can understand the severity of the situation we're here in with our government being captured by Israel. I mean, that's a fact. We know it's captured. How do we let everyone else know? Well, let's think of a hypothetical that can get us to think, how would people respond if all of a sudden every one of our senators and congressmen and elected officials, all of a sudden they started wearing swastikas on their shoulders? Let's say they all did. Bernie, all of them, everyone, all across the aisle. How would we respond to that? We would do something about it. We would say, wait a minute, what the hell's going on? What are you guys doing? And they'll do their same speeches about taking on the oligarchy, da 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 da. But there was just a swastika sitting on their shoulder the whole time. What would we do? We would do something about it. So we need to start educating people that this is today's swastika. It's the Israel flag and the Israel lobby, and it's in everyone's pocket, and it might as well be on their shoulder like a swastika. And if we can educate people about that, we would have to do something about that. We would have to boycott the entire political process. That's what we need to do. That would then go in the direction of, as I said, go towards cutting off funding somehow. If we bow out of our process and say our process is rigged, it's captured, we're not actually electing people to represent us. They're representing Israel, an ethno-state military occupation. We're done with it. So that's I think that would be something that we would have that advantage that other places in the world don't, that we could help cut off that funding.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
It's like the race
I'm
car
just
drivers.
spitballing here. I don't know, because we don't have any options here. That's all. I'm just throwing out another idea.
Well, no, it's like the race car drivers that wear, their sponsors. That's been an idea that's actually been thrown out about people, politicians wearing who funds them. But I mean,
Yeah.
technically, yeah. I mean, APAC funds the majority of our Congress in one way or another. So wearing some sort of loyalty pin to
Yeah.
Zionist Israel, I mean, is not a far-fetched idea. And I think it helps that people, go into Congress and say, hey, you're funding a genocide, and they go after politicians. I think that makes some noise, but I think ultimately we need to attack the economic sector when it comes to government and when it comes to Israel, because they, just like Yemen is doing by attacking their ships in the Red Sea, and which also, by the way, affects the United States, which is why they're all bombing Yemen. That's the way to do it. Israel cares about their money. They care about their weapons that enable them to do what they're doing. So if you attack those sectors, then yeah, that's going to ultimately be able to stop them. So, I mean, I'm not for invasions of most kinds, but in the case of, the Nazis, what did we do? We we fought a war, right? So
Yeah.
I think people aren't understanding fully, or are not wanting to admit that what we're seeing happen right now in the Middle East and West Asia is this generation's Holocaust.
Yeah.
And that's still a controversial thing for people to hear, because it's not the exact same thing, and also because of the players this time around. But I think that once people understand that that's by definition what's happening is what this is, then I think they'll be able to understand what needs to be done, what needed to be done to at least momentarily stop the Nazis back then, is what needs to be done to stop Israel today.
Yeah. And we're not the allies this time. We are, to borrow another line from Bush and Cheney, we are the axis of evil. That's us.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, wake up. We're on the wrong side of this. We're on the wrong side. We're not the allies. Be nice if we could figure out how to be on the allies with the people on the right side of history. We're just not. We're just on the wrong side of this. Axis of evil.
And I think, Matt, that's hardest for people to digest that little bit of information because we're so programmed to think we're the good guys from
Yeah.
birth. So it is something that's really hard for people to really admit to themselves. And as we said earlier, Matt, going into this next section, this is all tied together. This what is going on domestically and foreign policy. This is an area where we can see how immigration posed as a domestic issue is truly a foreign policy issue in its core. And this is why foreign policy matters to everyday American US citizens. And because from this type of domestic policy is it's entirely affected by how we conduct our foreign policy. So there was the visa and green card holders have been caught in the crackdown from the Trump administration. Now, this is regarding immigration, right? But I'll explain how this really truly relates to everything else. So, they write from The Guardian. This is from The Guardian. In recent weeks, several foreign nationals and tourists have been arrested or deported as the Trump administration ramps up its immigration enforcement. Some of the cases appear to be over legitimate issues, others seem highly politicized. One of the most controversial is that of Mahmoud Khalil, a pro Palestinian activist who helped orchestrate the protests at Columbia University. Khalil, a permanent U.S. resident, was detained earlier this month by federal immigration authorities who were reportedly acting on a State Department order to revoke his green card. We know that there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it, President Trump wrote on his social media site, adding that Khalil's arrest would be the first of many to come. So several tourists were also arrested. This prompted Canada, the UK, and Germany, and other countries in Europe to issue advisories about traveling to the US because if you're a foreigner or you look like a foreigner, they might arrest you. And there was also Badar Khansuri, who was a fellow, postdoctorate fellow at the University of Washington, Georgetown University, was detained last week and he had his J1 visa revoked. He's an Indian national and he was accused by DHS of actively spreading Hamas propaganda. And again, what is Hamas propaganda? Is it just saying we don't want Palestinian babies, children, and innocent civilians to be slaughtered? Is it why is Israel allowed to do this with impunity? Is it criticizing the genocide that is happening, or like what is Hamas terrorism? And is Hamas terrorist in really the real sense of the word when they're just literally being annihilated and defending themselves? I mean, we could go on and on about this, right? But they can manipulate the narrative, they manipulate the laws to fit in a certain way to where now if you say genocide is wrong and Israel is committing a genocide, which are facts, verifiable facts by definition, that Israel's an occupation, you could be arrested. And if you look like brown or Muslim, because there is a racial profiling nature to this, of course they're going to arrest any white guy too that's holding a Palestinian flag, of course, or a kafaya. This is all part of it. But what I'm saying is they're using this whole thing to fearmonger the American people, especially the Trump supporters who are afraid of immigrants, right? To say, oh, look, these terrorists are coming in and they're Hamas and they're gonna impose Sharia law, and this is what they're doing, and they're with Iran and they want to come in here and build a caliphate and take your women and rape them. This is the mentality of where we're going, Matt, and I'm not exaggerating.
No, you're not. This is that pre-crime. Oh, we got to get them before they do something, right? It's the preemptive strike. Again, back to Bush and Cheney. We do the preemptive strike. before they do the thing, because we think they're going to do the thing because it's in their nature to do the thing because they hate us, right? That's what they hate us.
Yeah.
They hate Jews. They hate everyone. We have to stop them. So what's the crime? So we have to ask, well, what did they do? Oh, they spread propaganda. Well, what's the propaganda they spread? We have to be able to ask these questions instinctually. And like you said, the targeting of the Trump base, that's what this is about. It's about fooling them. It's about fooling the Trump base. And they've done a very good job. Now, not all of them. Some of them are seeing this. Some of them are going, wait a minute. This doesn't seem right. But a lot of them are fooled right now. And what I will say to those people, the Trump base that seems to think this is a good idea, seems to think everything checks out, I would say to them this: look at the word propaganda, look at the word anti-American, and remember that same language was used against you 4 years earlier. We're talking about the COVID stuff. We're talking about anti-science, whatever the thing is. If you're anti, we have to cancel you. What was the appropriate question if they want to cancel someone for saying COVID misinformation? You say, well, what was the what did they say? So the fact that you're not asking, well, what is tell me what was being said. Everything, by the way, everything comes back is like, it's all legit. There is no propaganda. It's all challenging the state narrative. That's what it is. And so you've seen it. If you're a Trump voter and you're buying this garbage, you've seen this play out in just other areas with the same language. So understand what that looks like. The Russian propaganda, this, and COVID propaganda, that, anti-American, anti-science, anti-whatever the anti is. That's how they shut people up. And we have to be a little more curious about that, particularly Trump voters, and that think this is legit, and stand up and say, this is not how our system is supposed to work. Put the Israel versus Hamas aside and just know that independently of that, this is not how democracy works. And you should know that better than anyone, because that's what you guys fought for the last 4 or 5 years. Okay, so here we are. This is the moment of truth. This is when you put it to test. The things that we were out in the streets, we supported the January 6th protesters. We knew that was wrong. And you guys knew that was wrong. Same thing with that. Oh, anti-American showing up to the Capitol and your domestic terrorism. And well, what was the charge? Well, they had an intent to take. Okay. So what was the crime? Well, no, lock them up. No due process. So you knew that was wrong. So we need to apply that here too. Let's be consistent. Let's recognize the game plan. This is it's a psyop. This is how they take us down. Do not fall for it, especially now. Especially when we're funding a genocide. That's what people are talking about. That's the anti-American propaganda. The Hamas propaganda is stop funding genocide. Okay, so I don't know if we have to shake them to get them to listen, but this is what it is. This is the game plan.
And I'm glad you made that connection, because that's kind of where I want to go with this. Because once this happens to people like foreigners or people who have green cards, that's an elevation right there. That first of all, when you have a green card, you have rights. You may not be a citizen, but you have rights that as a resident of the United States, you are allowed to live your life, and you can't vote, but you have other rights that are recognized as being a tax-paying resident of the United States. And for the Trump administration now to go after people who are legally in the United States is really ramping up this very fascistic persecution, because, as you said, we use similar accusations to go after US citizens. Imagine now with this added layer of supporting now not just domestic but foreign terrorism, in terms of Hamas or in terms of Hezbollah, because there was another woman that was accused of supporting terrorists because she supported Hassan Nasrallah when he had his funeral. So what we're talking about here is the persecution of political beliefs disguised of in a way that is just a complete and total labeling of terrorism. This is without people doing anything like on January 6th. This is just people who might have said something on social media. This is just people who might have said something to a coworker or to a family member, or who posted something at some point or another. Now we're talking about the persecution of social media platforms, of your posts, of anything you say. We're talking about surveillance. We're talking about the expansion of the surveillance state. And so to me, this is the most hypocritical thing that any of the people who voted for Donald Trump, for saying that he's going to end censorship, he's a free speech guy, all the free speech absolutists, all the people that are First Amendment advocates, and also the Fourth Amendment, and all of the people who want, the surveillance state to be reined in, who want people to be able to have liberty, freedom to say whatever it is they need to say and not be censored and not be persecuted, should be speaking out against this, because these are some of these people are US residents. And clearly the next step is to go after US citizens.
Right.
And we have seen that already happen with the Trump supporters. But now what does the Trump administration do? It comes in and does that to the other side. The Marxist, Hamas supporting left who just wants to take down America. Well, of course, you're actually building up that sentiment when you're persecuting people for not wanting babies to be killed in Gaza. So this is, again, they do the same exact thing for their other team, against their other team, against the other team, and that's it. And there's no difference. They just switch around. When we talk about, as you mentioned, COVID, there was also the other liberal side about my body, my choice. I support women's rights to choose, right? And so there was that hypocrisy. Oh, you support women's rights to choose, but you don't support people's right to say no to an experimental vaccine. That was the whole argument. Well, here it is. Do you support people's right to have a political belief and to stand against genocide, or do you not support people's rights to whatever belief they have, even if you disagree with it? So you can't have it both ways. Either it is or it isn't. And these people are showing just how hypocritical they are, how easily, completely, and totally they just are so easily brainwashed in the US. It's really, really sad what I've been seeing, and I'm glad I'm not there. But I just want to read this, Matt, and I want to get your take on what Donald Trump said, because this is, again, it's not just his rhetoric, because Donald Trump has always had this rhetoric that sends people, upset and off the rails. But for me, it's never been about his rhetoric. It's been about what he's actually doing. And now his rhetoric is actually being followed by actions and what he's actually doing. He said, I look forward to watching the sick terrorist thugs get 20-year jail sentences for what they're doing to Elon Musk and Tesla. Perhaps they could serve them in the prisons of El Salvador, which have become so recently famous for such lovely conditions. So now we're sending people away, people that we didn't investigate, that had zero due process of any kind, even though international type of process that they're entitled to as human beings and foreign nationals. We're sending them to a foreign prisoner, even though foreign prison, even though they're not from these countries. Like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah, this is insane. And I think he can only get away with this because he knows enough of his base will be okay with this. That's why he wouldn't be able to do this if enough of them were vocal and could apply principle. And I think that's what we're talking about, is the lack of principle. We're talking about that who we thought was in the camp with us. We thought we had a real populist movement going based on principle, based on punching up and calling out the BS. And it didn't matter what party was doing it. We knew it was wrong. And we thought we were aligning with other people on the right and the left, everybody coming together. And then when push comes to shove, they never had principle at all. And it must be hard. It must be hard to be one of them, one of these Trump supporters right now, waking up in the morning and not understand. It must be hard to say, well, what side am I supposed to be on? But Fee, you, me, and our audience, it's not hard for us. It's very easy. It takes a second. We look at the story breaking. We know what side to be on. It's very easy when you have principle. It's very easy to be consistent and say, this is bullshit. You're going to take these people without due process and send them to a country, by the way, a country which you have no historical you don't want to let any of your base know about American imperialism, how we've destroyed these countries. And I know you got the Venezuela story as well. These are the places that we have wrecked. We have wrecked, and we've created these chaotic situations. And now you want to rub it in people's face and say, hey, why don't we just ship people over there into those horrible conditions? I don't know how it got all horrible over there. I have no idea. Maybe because they're not capitalists like us. That's why. And we'll just say F you and lock the gate, throw away the key, and good riddance. And there's not enough of his base saying this is wrong. More of them need to stand up and say this is wrong. That's the only way it's going to stop him from doing these tweets and getting away with, like you said, the action is worse. The fact that he's saying it and then he's doing it, that's what we need to be concerned of right now, for sure.
And just some context, if y'all don't understand, there's been people that are being picked up, and not just like accused of supporting Hamas, but actual foreigners that are being picked up and sent to prison. Now, a lot of them being accused of being part of the cartels and the Venezuelan gangs, specifically Tren de Agua, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But the problem with all of this is none of these people have been tried in any way, shape, or form. We're going back to the times during the war in Iraq where we completely just assumed guilt and there was zero attempt to do any investigation. And these people are being sent away to prison in El Salvador, one of the largest prisons that Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and a lot of people that really support prisons and support a police state, which, by the way, this is a much smaller scale of what the bigger picture is. The United States is descending into fascism, and it's not just Trump. This is because of Biden, we got Trump, and because of Trump, we got Biden, and because of Obama, this is all. We've been inching closer towards this fascist state that we're the United States is living in. Really, it is truly there, because people aren't really. There's no answer. You either get the liberalism, which eventually leads you to fascism, or you get the neocons, which eventually leads you there too. So the American people really haven't had any solid type of political salvaging, except the one attempt with Bernie Sanders, and then look what happened. And even Donald Trump, you could say there was this, populist movement, and look what happened. So they both have been captured. They both are part of this. And now we're at a point where we're just grabbing people off the streets. We're jailing them. We don't know what's going on, if they're foreigners, if they're this, if they're that. And who's next? Well, if you think, like I said, if you think that a government that's just going to go and violate everyone's human rights, that's going to allow a genocide, that's going to do everything that the United States government's doing, isn't going to eventually use it against you, you're completely daft, because you're next. It's coming for you. They're coming for you. If they're doing this to these people, even legal residents, they're coming for you. We're next. And there's not going to be a way to stop it, because your rights will be completely thrown out by a new law that says, oh no, because of the danger of Iran and these crazy terrorists coming from Iran and Venezuela is also backed by Iran. So therefore, they're all terrorists. And if you support any of them, then, you're also a terrorist. Because of that, your rights are stripped away. And now you have no rights, because this is for the greater good. The greater good of the United States, the national security of the United States. I'm not like, I don't have to make this up. This is the same rhetoric that was there during COVID, during the elections, during all of this stuff. We have seen this before. It's going to be repackaged and sent into a new thing. It's the same thing with the Patriot Act. It's just expanding. You're never going to get your rights back from before 9/11. Everything from there, that was the maximum. Now they're all just dwindling.
Yeah. And we know that surveillance state, Fiorella, was never intended to be used against the American people. It was to get those terrorists. That was the whole point. And the Patriot Act, all that stuff. It would never be used against us. This was to protect us. Of course it was. And we're talking about Trump tweeting all this out. I'm to the point where I can't wait for his next tweet. His next Truth Social post is going to say, let's start doing some waterboarding now. Let's get back to the good old Cheney illegal torture program days, the Guantanamo days. Why not? Like, we might as well. He never had to serve any punishment for that. And by the way, if the left, because we've been ragging on the MAGAs this whole time, if the left would have put as much energy into locking up Trump and lock up Dick Cheney and George Bush Jr. for war crimes, for an illegal war in Iraq, for killing 1 million Iraqis, for starting an illegal torture program, everything. If they put as much effort into that, or half as much effort into that, maybe we could pull the curtain back on, like what you said, both parties are corrupt, both parties are pro prison state, pro taking away everybody's rights and take away due process, and it will come for you next if it hasn't already. We need more people on both sides to get angry about this, because we've all been captured by both sides of the aisle. It's been one big facade, left versus right, red versus blue. They're both neo-lib parties that just want to put everyone in jail, and that's it. And Kamala talked about that too. Oh my God, they say it out loud. Both sides say it. And Biden with the crime bill. I mean, we know the history here. We need more people on both sides to get upset about this, and know that with Dick Cheney and George W. Bush walking around with nothing to account for, that should tell you everything about what we're okay to do and what we're going to continue to do. And again, I can't wait to see Trump's post about let's bring back the waterboarding. Why not? It's fun. It's fun to torture folks. We got to torture some folks, as Obama said.
Well, they're terrorists, they deserve it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I want to show this tweet. I don't think you showed it yet, Jayme. This is the prison in El Salvador. Okay. And this was posted by this account, creepy.org, which said a country once known for having the world's highest murder rate now has the world's highest incarceration rate. So they surpassed, apparently, the United States. And this is something that, again, Elon Musk and Donald Trump have been hailing, right? They've been saying this is great. We need to have this in the US. We need to be the ones to bring this up. And it's kind of crazy to me that this is something that is allowed to happen. Because I it's just weird to me that there's no respect on international lines. And I've never been one to like Bukele pasta, and I would always get into it because we have these friends from Latin America, and they always talk about, no, Bukele's not great. Like, yes, he has some, innovative ideas that made him popular, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that everything else he's saying are good. And he was, actively promoting the Bitcoin stuff, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's not, it's either or. It's like, okay, fine, he's promoting that, but when it came to foreign policy, when it came to just politics itself, he was never somebody that I would have trusted. And I think that there's so much that needs to be said about that in the context of the history of El Salvador. But I want to point out what Donald Trump has to do with what's happening, because Trump's team is planning for this military hold of migrants at the border. And all of this, again, is interconnected. Now, if this actually goes through, there's going to be just miles and miles of a buffer zone that's going to become a military installation. So there's going to be U.S. troops at the border holding migrants. And this is just going to be what exactly? Are we going to push war with elements of Central America, with Mexico? With, like, what exactly are we doing by sending military to the southern border, right? Because this is another country now that we're going to be infringing on. And the Mexican president has been pretty steadfast and resilient against responding to Trump's attacks, right? And if we do this, we're literally making another military, expanding our military apparatus into another country. We're becoming extremely antagonistic when it comes to to our neighbors, or what we consider our backyard. And this supposed buffer zone would be from, I guess, like Southern California
Mm.
all the way into New Mexico / El Paso, like that part. But it's obviously going to be bordering Mexico. And this is, of course, under the guise of combating the cartels, Matt. But how many times have we known about the cartels and about what the DEA has to do with cartels and about how all of this came about, and the CIA's multiple Latin American interventions that are related to the war on drugs? That was obviously a whole operation. So it's crazy. The defense secretary that we knew was going to be one of the most warmongering ones, Pete Hegseth,
Yeah.
said he supported this idea to militarize the southern border, and he said it's essential to U.S. national security. And yeah, so I really see this being terrible. He wants to expand Guantanamo Bay. He wants to continue imposing on Venezuela, which is the next thing I'll talk about. But this is just steroids on Latin America. He's just going after Latin America, going after the Middle East, painting everybody south of the border and
Yep.
east as terrorists that need to be stopped, and therefore we need to militarize here, we need to militarize there, as you said, right? Going back to George Bush, get them over there before they get us over here. Like,
Yeah.
deja vu.
Oh yeah. And remember, guys, the Donald Trump loves the CIA. He hates the FBI,
Hmm.
but he loves the CIA. And he made that very clear to us that we need to have the other three-letter agencies, the other government agencies need to behave more like the CIA. So we're going to clean those other ones up and get them up to a point where they're top-notch in what they do. And what we know they do is they create the chaos in all these other countries in order to have us have a problem to solve. And that's how you get the military expansion. It's a genius blueprint, and they are much better. He is right about that. It is the most equipped government agency we have because they're able to get away with so much without any pushback. And he defends them at every cost. So understand that, yes, we're never going to have a conversation with this administration, the previous administration, or the next administration. We're never going to have a conversation about American imperialism and how we use the CIA as the tool to create the cartel problem in Mexico, to create the problems in Venezuela. We do this on purpose in order to then say, hey, well, we gotta solve the problem. America to the rescue. Bring more military. Bring more tariffs. Whatever the angle is, we got to stop them from coming here. We're creating the immigrant problem. We're creating we got violence coming into our country. We're creating everything, and we're doing it on purpose, and we're not telling the American people about it, and then it justifies this type of military expansion in all these different countries. And it's sad to see. Yeah, it's sad to see we're doing this all throughout the Middle East and throughout Latin America. And we have to talk more about Latin America because people aren't really aware that this is happening. And I'm glad you brought this one up, Fee, because this has always been the game plan. And go CIA. Yay. That's the mantra for MAGA. So there you go. That's what you voted for.
So we knew, right, that the Donald Trump administration was going to go after the Middle East and that they were going to go after the global South, especially Latin America. But it's happening really fast because Donald Trump just proposed a 25% tariff on anybody, not just Venezuela, anybody that buys oil from Venezuela.
Oh my God.
So this is from Donald Trump's Truth Social. President Donald J. Trump announced today that the United States of America will be putting what is known as a secondary tariff on the country of Venezuela for numerous reasons, including the fact that Venezuela has purposely and deceitfully sent to the United States undercover tens of thousands of high-level and other criminals, many of whom are murderers and people of a very violent nature. Among the gangs they sent to the United States is Tren de Aragua, which has been given the designation of foreign terrorist organization. We are in the process of returning them to Venezuela. It is a big task. In addition, Venezuela has been very hostile to the United States and the freedoms which we espouse. Therefore, any country that purchases oil and or gas from Venezuela will be forced to pay a tariff of 25% to the United States on any trade they do with our country. All documentation will be signed and registered, and the tariff will take place on April 2nd, 2025. So that's soon. Liberation Day in America. Please let this notification serve to represent that the Department of Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and all other law enforcement agencies within our country have been so notified. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald Trump on Truth Social, 3/24/25, 10:37 a.m. So he woke up with this. Yeah, Matt, what do you think? Is this going to work?
Is it going to work? I mean, he's going to push this. It might happen. But we know that Maduro, we know that the people of Venezuela are resilient. We know that they've been, I mean, look, in that tweet, he's talking about they're being so hostile to Venezuelans are so hostile to us. I wonder why a country that you aren't even acknowledging has a legit president, a guy you tried to coup so many times, you tried to murder this guy, his predecessor, Hugo Chavez, you tried to murder him. And when I say you, I mean our Western military war machine. We've tried to murder them over countless times, countless coups, countless failed coups, and they're still going strong. And I have to say this. Look, obviously, when you displace millions of Venezuelans, of course they're going to come into other countries. They're going to end up in our country, and of course we're going to have situations. We're not going to deny that there aren't situations with displaced Venezuelans here. But you're creating the situation. You're throwing more terrorists at them. That's what caused them to displace in the first place. All because why? Because you don't like the socialist approach to oil and to gas being available to its people. You think well, that's crazy? How dare they not have these big corporations in here and exploiting the people for gas? So that's your big problem. Well, it seems like that's been the problem the whole way, even back in the Hugo Chavez days, Fiorella. That's always been the issue. It's like, oh, how dare Venezuela, the socialist program for oil and other goods. We're gonna teach them a lesson, because if we let them succeed, what's that gonna look like to our capitalist model, our American exceptionalism model? We cannot let that happen. So we will F you as many times as we can. And again, I think that the Venezuelans, they're resilient and they'll find a way through this. But yeah, I think Trump is going hardcore, and this might happen April 2nd for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it'll happen. I agree with you on that. I just think it's going to backfire against the United States, because I mean, you're talking about punishing other people for their own decisions. So you're basically saying that they're not allowed to conduct their affairs, their foreign affairs, as they see fit. They're not allowed to exert national sovereignty. And they're allowed to, but if you don't like it, then you're going to punish them for it. It comes off, and it is an extremely authoritarian position to take for all the times we call Assad or Putin or Iran an authoritarian country. For all the times we say this, I mean, really, the more authoritarian authoritarianism is coming from the United States. And one of the things that I have a problem with is not the fact that these people don't exist, they do, but there are several factors here. There are reports that some of these gangs are actually exacerbated by the United States itself in order to destabilize Venezuela, and to use this method to try to promote this idea that all these people are just terrorists in order to push regime change in Venezuela. The other thing that's happening is the majority of the people that are being arrested and sent to a foreign prison aren't even gang members. So, and we know this because Venezuela has been receiving several groups now of these migrants that were reported. And this is from Casachuan News. They received a group of 199 Venezuelan migrants who were deported from the United States, who were in the process of being sent abroad to this other prison. And this was after an arrangement was made for the migrants to be picked up in Honduras. And according to a Venezuelan leadership, one of the Diosdado Cabello, he says that none of these people that were brought back to Venezuela or repatriated were part of Tren de Aragua. So it's so we don't know like who exactly is part of Tren de Aragua because no investigation has been done.
Mm.
They're just being accused of this. And some of these people are actually getting caught up and going to prison. And we've seen I think, TikTok videos of some of these people being kept in and, for days without any sort of rights or anything like that. So again, I go back to, has the deportation happened under Trump or Biden? Absolutely. Biden deported more people than Trump did in his first term, 100%. I mean, that is true. This is nothing new. What is new, though, is the way we're going after now people for their political views and throwing them in with all of the immigration issues. That is extremely dangerous because that is going to be once again used against every single American. And that is a fact. It will be used against US Americans. And I think people need to be made aware of this connection. They need to, if they don't care about foreign nationals or other people or immigrants or whatever the case is, they need to understand that the same type of rule, law, strategy is going to come for them at any given moment. And what we're doing with Venezuela, with Mexico, with all these other countries is exacerbating an immigration issue that we supposedly want to stop. So that's the reality.
Yeah, and I have to say, I might have been a little too optimistic that we were going to just repeat Trump's first term, where he actually did have a problem getting his ICE, policies, to be cooperated with, and that was one of the reasons why we saw that Biden and Obama were way more successful at deportations. They were, because they could do it undercover. Nobody was pushing back. Everybody was cooperating, so everything was under just kind of low key. And the kids in cages. Nobody cared. Nobody cared until it was Trump. But we said, oh, wait, look at the numbers. He's not actually getting it done. So we thought, okay, well, maybe this time it'll be the same thing where he's not able to do the thing that he campaigned on and he pushed and he, posted about. But I might have been a little too optimistic because I'm saying he's getting more cooperation now. He's got more of a team behind him to get this done and to do things like this. Even though it is out in the open, even though he's gloating about it, he's getting it done. So something's different this term, and it's something we got to be concerned about. And I'll acknowledge, some of the people that were so afraid of this was the reason they didn't vote for Trump. Obviously, they still voted for Kamala, but there were some people, especially here in Hollywood, they talked about this. They said he's going to double down on this, and then I have to say that they were right. That's a reason not to vote for Trump. I don't think that's a reason to vote for Kamala, but it's a reason to say this guy's going to be much dangerous this time around, more than last time. And there's something to that. There's something to that.
And the whole point is, Matt, that we didn't have a choice.
That's right.
Really were put between a rock and a hard place, and people really, it doesn't matter because ultimately we don't have a fair election system. It's all entirely captured. So, even going to the people, they were right, but the other thing wasn't going to be good either. So what exactly is the answer? Obviously not electoral politics at this point. And the last thing I want to point out that kind of goes full circle is this thing that I saw added as we were on the air. And it's from Hotspots. And so the Trump administration accidentally added the Atlantic's editor to a signal group where the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, sent him classified details of upcoming U.S. strikes on Yemen, including precise info on weapons, targets, and timing hours in advance. First of all, I'm wondering where they're getting this information. But number one, this is what the first thing says, right? And it says Houthi PC small group, and somebody responds, I think that's Shady Vance. Excellent. A good start. Michael Waltz comes in with emojis. Good job, Pete, and your team. The team and Mal did a great job as well. Great work, all. Powerful start. So this is a signal chat. And JD asked Pete Hegseth, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. Let's just make sure our messaging is tight here. And if there are things we can do up front to minimize risk to Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. And VP Pete says, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic, but Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else is even close. Question is timing. I feel like now is as good of a time as any, given the POTUS directive to reopen shipping lanes. I think we should go, but POTUS still retains 24-hour decision space. The president was clear, green light, but we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. If Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the U.S. successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. So they're like literally going over all of this. It's kind of a window into how these people think, but it's also quite frightening and how totally robotic and dehumanized they are.
Yeah, they're showing the game plan. It's a chess game. People aren't human; they're just pieces on a board.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's sociopathic conversation. And I'll point this out: the fact that the Atlantic editor accidentally got added into the mix. What other mistakes are you guys making in your other chats? Who else is so? I'm thinking of a lot. There's a lot of stuff to kind of go through on this. This just happened. This is pretty wild, Fee. Well, good thing this got out and people can see it, because this is what we vote. This is what people voted for. This is the type of people running our ship, and it's a military ship. It's a military operation. That's all it is. It's a chess game, and the people aren't, they're not valued as human beings. This is just one big game of chess, and we're just going in for a checkmate. That's what they're doing. It's pretty wild. That's pretty wild.
It is wild. It's so wild, Matt, that there was a security, that there was a briefing, and a journalist asked why didn't they notice like a different phone number that was there. And it's either they wanted this to get out or they're dumb, right? So I after my experience and being in other countries and being in like and getting to know like governments on different levels and stuff, I personally feel that we as people consider governments and leaders and institutions almost at a level which they don't really exist as. We consider them to be perfect and incapable of making mistakes, and that's just not the case. It is very possible that these people made a mistake. It is very possible for any institution, even the ones you admire, to be wrong and make mistakes because they're human, and there's going to be human error. So I think, first of all, that is one thing we need to get out of. What? There's no way that these people won't see what no, yeah, there is. Even the people you think are the smartest people have blind spots, guys. It's just a fact. And I think sometimes we give more credit to our government and we think that they're smarter than they actually are. And I've come to that conclusion. Yeah.
I think you're right. I'm leaning towards this was a goof. This was a boo-boo. They did not mean, and we've all been, I don't know, people have been on this before. I think people have had this personal experience where you're like, someone got CC'd on an email that wasn't, and you're like, uh-oh, or somebody's responding and they forgot, they put reply all and they didn't mean, and then they start talking crap on you're like, oh God, like who's doing this? So these are human errors. These are mistakes, but we're talking about people's lives here. This isn't just some stupid email blast about it. Somebody act like talking crap on someone. This is like our lives. This is people's lives in different countries and how we're going to be bombing and murdering people with the taxpayers' money. So it's pretty wild when you think about it, because you're right. These are human beings making these type of mistakes and blunders. But good thing they did, because we needed to see this. And these are the type of people running our country. These are the type of people that were voted for. It's pretty wild. I keep saying the word wild, but I'm still trying to process this. Like, this just broke. This is insane. This is insane.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see if any further info comes out on this. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Well, guys, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for keeping up with us. We're starting to go back to regular schedule. Pasta's been out of sorts. So we're gonna continue trying to get the show on the road no matter what. At least Mondays and Fridays at around noon 30 or 1 is where we're aiming at. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I have an interview coming up this week that I didn't get a chance to do last week because of the techni- technical difficulties and stuff.
Mm.
So I'll have Jayme play that interview, or we're gonna play that interview. We're gonna do it. And Matt, what do you have going on this week?
Well, we had a interview, also a schedule issue from last week that got bumped to tomorrow. So we have a live one-on-one with I'm going to be doing with Ryan Christian, Last American
Nice.
Vagabond. That's tomorrow's Homeless Left show. We go at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, and then we'll have our co-host Jay Scott on with us as well. We hope that, and Craig Pasta comes on a lot. I know you come on once in a while as well, Fee. So I'd love to have you back on as well. But we go Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we kind of do a little switch off from TruthWire, so you guys can get a little of our different action, depending on what day of the week it is. And yeah, we like to get regular too, and do as much as we can Tuesdays and Thursdays every week, same time.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And just please follow us on X/Twitter, where we're also streaming. Share the stream. I'm also on Substack, and I've been getting pretty busy there. So look out for some new articles and stuff. A lot happening, guys. So sorry if I can't write about everything, because it does require a lot of investigation and stuff. But just yeah, bear with me, where there's a lot going on. So we'll see you next time. We'll see you Friday, hopefully, on this end, and on Matt's show Tuesdays and Thursdays. So thanks so much, everybody. See ya.